Come on! Are you happy to be here? Yes! I feel like a kid at Christmas morning. I've been waiting for this day so long. I've been looking at the package, touching the wrapping paper and shaking it and trying to see what's inside, and now it's finally time to unpack that gift. My name is Eric. I'm super happy to welcome you to Norrsken and this Leaps Talks session. This is the third time we're doing this. We started out in Berlin and then Boston and now finally Stockholm. And we're doing this with an amazing partner called Leaps by Bayer. And if you haven't heard of Leaps before, where have you been? They are pretty much the coolest corporate impact VC in the world. So they have identified 10 of the biggest challenges that the planet or people are facing, and they've committed 1 billion euros to invest in people, companies, ideas that can maybe solve these challenges. So you can understand that this is a partner that we love at Norrsken because they're impact first and then profitability, and we love it so much. It's that juicy combination of impact and sustainability and profits long term that we love here at Norrsken. So let's get started. And we're going to get started by introducing a very unique person, Elaine, who I got to meet a couple of years ago when she was part of the global management team at Ericsson. And she did so many amazing things there. But the one thing that really stood out for me was that she pioneered the tech for good movement in the world. Today, she's one of the founders of AI Sustainability Center, which is trying to understand what are the implications of AI on people and society, and what can we proactively do about that. But of course, her fantastic resume fades in comparison to the fact that tonight she's our moderator. So please welcome with a warm applause to the stage, Elaine.
Thanks, Eric, and super excited to be here tonight. I don't think I ever remember feeling such energy in a crowd, at least not in a very long time. So that's fantastic. Tonight is going to be about 2 technologies in particular that are going to help some of the 10 challenges that you saw on the screens in 1 billion euro. It's quite a commitment that's made, so super exciting to be part of one of the teams feeding into some of the advice in that area. So tonight's about artificial intelligence and it's about gene editing. And I know some about one and not a lot about the other, but I think tonight maybe all of us are going to become enthusiasts in one or another way about these 2 topics. Or if we fail, you will be a pessimist. So there's a few practicalities about tonight. We're going to have 2 lightning speakers that are going to keep the energy. We have Metzl and Max Tegmark. I'm going to come back to them in a few minutes. But first, I have to cover a few things. It's basically simple. We're going to do 3 things. It's going to be 2 lightning talks. We're going to have a panel, and then you're going to go and have some good food, drinks, and music. That's it. But a lot of tonight is about engagement. So in order to get your engagement from the crowd, there is a special system. So with that, we're going to start with the first speaker. Jamie is a tech futurist and a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. He's an advisor to the World Health Organization and author of the book Hacking Darwin, Genetic Engineering and the Future of Humanity, which is also the topic of his lightning talk tonight. He specializes in making revolutionary science and its implications understandable and actionable for individuals, companies, and governments. He told me he's also an ultra marathon runner, but even more interestingly, a chocolate shaman, which I just am already in love with that concept. But welcome up, Jamie.
Music. Yeah, I was promised that there was going to be like smoke and lasers, but the music is perfect. Thrilled to be here with all of you. Thrilled to be here at the Norrsken Foundation, which is really just doing such amazing work. And particularly thrilled to be here as part of LEAPS and in collaboration with LEAPS, because we are at a leap moment in our world. And we are leaping forward in our technology. And if we leap forward in our technology, and we don't leap forward in our ethics and values and public engagement, this wonderful story of possibility will become a terrible story of dysfunction, fear, and anger. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about science, but really science is just what brings us to the beginning of the conversation, because this is a conversation about ethics. We are here about ethics. The question isn't science, yes or no. We know the answer, science, yes. The question is how best. And the answer to how best our technologies can be used is up to all of us. And that's why we're here, and that's why these kinds of dialogues are so important. But we are leaping forward, and the reason that we are leaping forward is we are at this moment of exponential change. People throw that word around, but what does it mean? It means that right now we have more people who are literate and educated than pretty much at any point in the entire history of our species. As a matter of fact, maybe 20 years ago, we got to the point where right now there are more people educated and literate than everyone on Earth combined through the entire history of human evolution until about 20 or 30 years ago. And it's not just that we have all of this brain power, it's that people are connected to each other through these incredible networks. There were different parts of the world, and sorry I'm speaking fast, but this 10 minutes and all this energy pushes me forward. There were different parts of the world that came up with the recipe for bronze and copper 1, 2, 3,000 years apart. And that means that if you are 3,000 years later than some other civilization in coming up with bronze, all of the things you can do with bronze don't happen for that period of time. Today, if somebody comes up with the recipe for bronze or anything else, you know what you do? You just post it. You send an email, you write a paper, and then everybody else on Earth now has it. So put that in the bronze example. Now you're 3,000 years ahead in developmental time than you otherwise would have been. And that's in everything, in every area. And so we are racing forward, and we have these different names for technologies as if they are in silos. We have computer science and machine learning and AI and genetics and biotech and nanotech and quantum. And it's confusing because that's not really what's happening. What we're seeing is a super convergence of technologies, that the computer science revolution makes the machine learning and AI revolution possible, which unlocks the secret of biology, and then biological design feeds back into all of those other areas. And it's this loop of technologies leaning against each other and driving change ever forward on this exponential J-curve. And it's moving so fast, but it's also accelerating. And because of that, because it's accelerating, our sense of time, based on the way our brains are designed for evolutionary purposes, our sense of time looking forward, if we benchmark it based on the rate of change looking backwards, is going to be too conservative and too slow. So we all need to really open up our minds. I write nonfiction, but I also am a science fiction writer. And one of the reasons why I like science fiction is it allows us to step outside of ourselves and imagine a different future. But everybody needs to think like a science fiction writer, like a futurist, to be able to fathom what is coming and how quickly it is going to get here. Because the limit on what is possible is in many cases just our own imagination. And our own imagination is in many ways limitless, especially when there are so many of us thinking and working and collaborating together. And that is going to open up a whole new set of possibilities in every area of endeavor. Max is going to talk about AI, which is, again, it's one of these enabling technologies that is going to touch pretty much everything else. My area is genetics and biotech. And basically what we are recognizing, the key realization of this moment in our history is that our biology and all of biology is as readable, writable, and hackable as our information technology. And it's this crazy thought that this little group of hominins who climbed down from the trees in Africa, who biologically aren't that different from our cousins, the bonobos and the chimpanzees, all of a sudden we have access and we have developed these tools to remake all of life on Earth, including our own. And that's exciting and it's scary. And you have to have both feelings or you're going to be missing something. And the genetics revolution is not some far-off sci-fi fiction. It is happening right now, and there are 3 key areas where we are already experiencing it and will continue to do so. The first one, and we have what was on the slides a moment ago, and what Bayer and others are working on, is this fundamental transformation of healthcare. And we are moving from a world of generalized medicine based on population averages, where you go to a doctor and in most cases you get treated based on the fact that you're a human, based on averages, to a world of precision or personalized medicine, where your treatments will be tailored to your own individual biology. And so your doctor, when prescribing some kind of treatment, is going to want and need to know who you are as an individual. And how are they going to do that? Through your electronic health and life records, through your personal history, your family history, your sensors, but the most important piece of your health record and the important foundation of your treatment will be your sequenced genome. And most people will have their genome sequenced immediately after birth or before birth. So we are very, very quickly moving to a world where we will have millions. We now have millions, but tens, hundreds of millions, and then within a decade up to 2 billion people who have had their whole genome sequenced. And then we will have these massive data sets of genotypic, genetic, and phenotypic information, and we will use that to unlock the secrets of complex genetics and complex systems biology more broadly. And that will transition us from this world of precision healthcare to predictive healthcare. And what that means is from the moment just after or before your birth, your parents and then you will know about your range of possibility in many different areas. And part of that will be healthcare. And it will be great to know that your child has, for example, an increased risk of getting type 2 diabetes or breast cancer, because you can think about testing earlier and lifestyle changes. And this will really help us move toward where we have to move toward a predictive model of healthcare. But we don't have a disease genome or a healthcare genome. We have a human genome. And so this genetic information is going to tell us many things about who and what we are, have at least the range of possibility to be, including areas of traits like height, complex genetic traits, height, genetic component of personality style, genetic components of IQ. And we are really touching some of these core foundations of what it means to be a human being. And then in the area of assisted reproduction, we're going to use and are already using this technology to sequence pre-implanted embryos, and then with a process that exists all over the world, including here, of selecting among these pre-implanted embryos, called pre-implantation genetic testing, based on a genetic understanding of possibility, and then using gene editing tools like CRISPR, and now this week there's a new tool better than CRISPR called prime editing, to edit the genomes of pre-implanted human embryos. And this will be done both to eliminate harms and to provide benefits, and there will be no clear boundary between those two things. So this is racing forward. And it's racing forward in a context of us, where we humans, we're very different within societies and between societies, and we are very competitive, both within and between societies. When you look at a country like China, they have these core technologies that they are seeing as the foundation for building their competitive edge. And the application of genetics and biotech is certainly one of those. And this raises fundamental ethical questions, issues like, how do we think about interfering with complex biological systems we don't fully understand? equity, who has access to these technologies, and diversity, which is not a nice to have. Diversity is the sole survival strategy of our species. And if we want to live in a world where the benefits, the incredible benefits of these technologies are optimized and the harms are minimized, we can't just leave it up to governments. We can't just leave it up to experts. This is up to all of us. And that means everybody needs to be educated. Everybody needs to be part of the conversation. Everybody needs to be empowered. And we need to group together to say, we want our elected officials to focus on these issues. And we want to begin to develop norms for making sure that our most cherished values guide the application of our most powerful technologies. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, I can't wait to ask about superhumans, but we're going to come back to that. So next, our next speaker is going to be Max Tegmark. Max, or as I say, Mad Max Tegmark, is a professor at MIT. He's been called the smartest Swede in the world and is at the heart of the spider's web of brilliant minds who are trying to make sure that humanity will not be overrun by artificial intelligence. 2 years ago, Elon Musk plowed $10 million into the AI research network, the Future of Life Institute. The title of Max's talk will be Life 3.0, Being Human in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, which is also the title of one of his most recent books. Welcome up, Max. Oh, you went that way.
Tjena! It's a great pleasure to be back home in my hometown. Let's start with listening to the words of a famous philosopher.
To alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
All right. Yay! Woo! Now, I like this so much because if you just replaced the word alcohol by artificial intelligence, it would still be funny, wouldn't it? Because it's such a double-edged sword. And that's exactly the theme we're on here tonight. How can we get the upside of these powerful technologies without the downside? So, first of all, we can all agree that AI is getting more powerful. Just think about it. Not long ago, robots couldn't walk. Now they can do backflips. Not long ago, we didn't have self-driving cars. Now we have self-flying rockets that can land themselves with AI. Not long ago, we didn't have AI that could do proper face recognition. Now AI can not only do face recognition, but it can simulate Jamie's face saying things he never said. Not long ago, AI couldn't beat us at the Asian board game of Go. Raise your hand if you've ever played this. Pretty tough, yeah? Then Google crushed not just human gamers at Go and chess, but more interestingly, it crushed human AI researchers who, like myself, would spend decades handcrafting algorithms, and by just playing against itself for 24 hours, it blew all of that away and made it obsolete. Not long ago, and so on, you can make it a long, long list. AI is improving in power. Now, the good news is it can solve problems. For example, AI can now save lives, right? Many of the over 1 million lives wasted on the Earth's highways every year and roads, I think will soon be savable by autonomous vehicles, as well as even more lives that can be saved just from eliminating silly mistakes in healthcare, according to a recent study. And still more, by having AI-powered diagnosis. We now have machines doing better diagnosis than humans for prostate cancer, lung cancer, and various eye diseases. Not long ago, an ultrasound machine was big and clunky and expensive. Now you can get one that fits in your pocket, connects to your phone, and is affordable, democratizing healthcare around the world. Not long ago, AI couldn't solve the famous protein folding problem in biology, but now AI won the protein folding competition last year and blew away all the human competition by taking input, just a genetic sequence, and predicting what the shape would be of the protein it folded into, which can really revolutionize drug discovery and drug development. Here you see the great agreement between the simulation, which is cheap, and doing it the old way and measuring it with X-ray crystallography, which is slow and expensive. So those are just examples, a few of them, of huge benefits we can get from solving problems. But of course, just as in Homer Simpson's little quip there, AI can also cause new problems. For example, it can manipulate people, like Cambridge Analytica did very successfully.
They thought it was
It can
fireworks
assassinate
first,
people.
but it was a drone bomb.
This assassination attempt in
against
Venezuela failed, but this one you see here unfortunately succeeded. And it can also wreak a lot of economic havoc. Recently, drones took out half of Saudi Arabia's oil production, and some idiot decided to drop a bomb on his ex-girlfriend's house with a drone. And it can also cost a lot of money if you deploy systems that you don't fully understand, like Knight Capital put in this clever trading system which was losing $10 million per minute until someone was like, no, turn this thing off 44 minutes later. And sometimes it's more than money, sometimes it's lives. This was a very simple system that Boeing put in their 737 MAX, but they hadn't understood it as well as they should have, and people died. It can aid very much people who maliciously want to hack things. If you have a Yahoo account that was hacked, because so were all the other 3 billion Yahoo accounts, and it helps hackers.
You see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele.
So this opens countless new possibilities for scams. They're much more efficient than if you get an email from some Nigerian prince, right? So how can we get the upside and not the downside? This is the key theme that we're going to continue discussing after this. And the basic message I have is, first of all, we need to draw a clear line between acceptable and unacceptable uses of technology. Now, I know what many of you are thinking. That's impossible. Max is just an idealistic dreamer. It's never going to work. But actually, it is possible. Our friends in biology have already shown how to do it. They very successfully managed to rally biologists to persuade the world's politicians that we should draw a line and use biology for saving people, helping people, rather than new ways of killing them with biological weapons. And biologists didn't just sit around and wait for politicians who knew less about biology than they did to make laws and rules. No, they got ahead of the game, met in Asilomar, California, and drew their own line. And as a result of this, we love biotech today. We associate it with good things, not with new ways of murdering people, etc. Everybody won because they drew a line. Inspired by this, AI researchers, we organized a conference in exactly the same place, Asilomar, California, for leading AI researchers from industry and academia to discuss where they wanted to draw the line. It produced this list of 23 principles, which were signed by over 1,000 AI researchers from around the world. They have been endorsed by the state of California and helped inspire recent legislation and rules from guidelines from the European Union and others. So we're on the right track there. And in summary, I believe firmly that we have to feel both the excitement and the fear to really get this right. Einstein said, make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. We have to have both in mind. We have to have a clear positive vision of the upside and also be mindful of the downside so that we can make AI systems that don't overpower us, but that empower us. And I want to end, since we are here in Sweden, by talking about Sweden conquering the world. Shh, don't tell anyone else what we're up to here, those of you who are visiting Sweden. We've tried twice. First time we tried it this way with Viking swords and stuff. I cannot say I'm very proud of that. But we did it another time much more successfully. In 1945, we were like here, oh shit, we Europeans really blew it again, starting another world war. Maybe we could do something different this time. And we formulated this ridiculously ambitious, positive vision of a future where technology was used not just to make ever more powerful weapons, but to create a society where technology helped everybody. What about public health care for everyone? What about free university education for everyone? What about free pensions? And of course, I'm sure there were a lot of curmudgeons who were like, dude, you're such a loser idealist, go hug a tree. It's never gonna work. But the vision was so compelling, and Swedes are not just idealistic, but very practical folk also, that we actually made it work. And this idea conquered the world, right? Every single country in Europe copied it. Every single industrialized nation in the world except the US has also copied it now. And I would like to see us do this again. It's so pathetic watching political debates these days and how unambitious they are. I watched all the Trump-Clinton debates before the last election. AI came up 0 times. Here in Europe, likewise. Let's formulate welfare 3.0, and let's think, what can we do if we can grow world GDP by a huge factor with AI? How can we create a truly inspiring future where we all get dramatically better off, not just for the next election cycle in one country, but for all countries? So China wins, the US wins, Europe wins, and why not for billions of years? Why not help life spread into the universe? Let's be really ambitious, just like we were in 1945. Because the more clear vision we have for something awesome, the more likely we are to all get it. Thank you.
You're going to stay. Can we just clap one more time? We got to show them the love. That was so hard. It was so hard. You did it.
Thank you.
Tech support to the
thanks
to the
to
CV.
our awesome audio-visual team who got it to work as well.
Jamie, come on back up. Okay, so we're going to have a seat, start the panel. Well, lots of new insights into AI and gene editing, but we're going to start and make sure like everyone is with us and everyone's on the same page. And I'm going to ask you both. So, Max, what is AI? And Jamie, what is gene editing? Now just define it. You've talked about it. You've kind of gone through the concepts, but now you have to define it like in a short way that everyone here is going to understand.
So I like, as Einstein said, definitions that are as short as possible, but no simpler than that. So artificial intelligence is simply non-biological intelligence.
Okay.
And what is intelligence then? I define it simply as the ability to accomplish goals. The more complex the goals are, the more intelligent.
Do we give them a pass on that? Everyone's with us? Good. Okay. Jamie?
So I'm going to slightly redefine the question and broaden
What?
it. I'm sorry, because genetic engineering is the category. So genetic engineering is humans applying our skills to change the genetics of plants and animals. And so when I tell people, I just wrote a book on genetic engineering, 95% of people say, oh, you mean CRISPR. And it's not what I mean, because if we think of genetic engineering as a pie, gene or genome editing is a slice of that pie, and CRISPR is just a small sliver of that slice. So gene editing, which is just a slice, is the ability, the metaphor that people use is a molecular scissors, but now we have molecular word processing, and so you have your genome, and every living thing has a genome, and using these new tools, we have with CRISPR the ability to go in and make a double-stranded cut and to replace, in some instances, some genetic code with other genetic code. And now with prime editing, which is kind of like the new better than CRISPR, just announced this week, it's going in and without making a cut, changing the letters. And this, as I was saying in my remarks, opens the door to humans potentially remaking all of life on Earth.
And you get a CRISPR pie. Come on.
That's cute.
I know, I tried. Okay, so I'm going to give the first question to you to just follow up on that, because sometimes AI and gene editing are kind of looked at in silos, but I know that you both are on stage together to talk about the intersection.
It's the same thing, like that the complexity of our genome is so far beyond the computational capacity of any human. And then the genome is an ecosystem set within a system of systems, which we call systems biology, itself set within the environment around us. And so the only way that we're going to really to understand with any significance the genome is using, and that's how we've gotten here, the tools of machine learning and AI. And I arrived this morning. Yesterday I was at a conference of the New York Stem Cell Foundation. It was just incredible how empowered the scientists are just this year compared to last year with these new AI and machine learning and complex modeling systems. It's all connected.
Do you want to add in on that?
Yeah, I totally agree that we're seeing a convergence, and ultimately the two fields will merge because both intelligence and biology, I think, are most usefully thought of as information processing. What is the DNA? It's the 2 gigabytes. And now you can edit them, and you can read and you can write them. And also other parts of biology, like gene expression, it's very helpful to think of the cell as a type of computer where information is often stored also in other ways. And this is the kind of information processing evolution came up with. Now in AI, we're coming up with other ways of doing it. And ultimately, we just want to do the best information processing we can, both inside our bodies and outside.
And how does that fit? You ended on your 3.0, and I have listened to your podcast this week, so I know there's a 1.0 and a 2.0. Can you talk through a bit your vision on that? The 1.0, the 2.0, you end at 3.0, and what kind of future you're seeing?
It fits perfectly with what Jamie was talking about, the convergence of the two fields, because life, so I call
what is 1.0?
Bacteria, for example, life 1.0, because they're so dumb they can't learn anything during their lifetime. It's all just in their DNA. I call all of us humans life 2.0 because we can learn, which we, in nerdy geek speak, might think of as installing new software into our brains. Like I installed an English-speaking module because it was useful. And it's that ability, of course, which has made Homo sapiens, the dominant life form on Earth. We can install our own software. With gene editing, we can start also designing our own hardware. So Life 3.0, technological life, could design all its hardware and replace all of it however it wants. It would ultimately break the shackles of evolution, sort of set life really free. And that leads to this really interesting philosophical question. What do we want to be in the future? What do we want it to mean to be human? And that's way beyond the technical question.
And you talked also in the end there about Sweden and the values of Sweden and how how that has led to a lot of issues around equality and so on. So with this, in this 3.0 world, I mean, how do we make sure that it's not a situation where the rich are getting richer, the rich get the best access to healthcare, the best education, the best of everything, and the poor are left behind? I mean, is there a scenario where we see an even greater digital divide?
Oh, of course. And many of my economist friends tell me that the key driver of inequality right now is precisely
access.
Tech. Well, Facebook, has about 10, 15 times higher value on the stock market than Ford with 10 times less employees. So when you replace humans by machines, of course, the money that used to go to workers and salary now go to the people who are already rich because they own the shares. And but look, things were pretty unequal in pharaonic Egypt and in the Gilded Age in the late 1800s. But then we decided as a society to do more of the Swedish model and make sure that everybody got lifted up. Now we're backsliding pretty severely since about 1980. But we could totally decide as a society to turn it around again and just make sure that everybody gets better off. The rich get richer, the poor get richer. But it ain't going to happen automatically. That's why I applauded so hard when you said you have to see the promise of everybody getting better off, but also have the fear that that's not the direction we're going right now and we have to work for it.
Yeah, these are the exponential benefits, but also the exponential risks. It's a new paradigm.
But it's empowering. I mean, in the Stone Age, it kind of sucked. We were so unempowered. No matter what we did, things are going to be the same
for a long
100
time,
years later, 30-year life expectancy and all the usual shit. Whereas now, what you do here will really, really make a difference.
We'll come back to the double-edged sword. Jamie, I want to ask a couple of questions about your latest book. You stated our DNA is becoming readable, writable, and hackable, and you talked about that in your talk. How hackable? What's the risk to people and society?
Well, so
what do we do?
Two questions. How hackable? Entirely hackable. And right now, the complexity of our tools is not a match. The sophistication of our tools, is not a match for the complexity of our biology. But it will be, because our biology is about as complex as it's been for millions of years. But the sophistication of our tools is increasing at an exponential rate. So there will come a time, I think it will be sooner rather than later, when the sophistication of our tools will meet and then exceed the sophistication of our biology. And just as now we can understand a single-cell organism, Max talked about bacteria, who are actually kind of incredible in their own way.
Oh, yeah.
But we can understand a bacteria, a roundworm, pretty well, just because it's their complexity relative to our sophistication. We're going to be able to understand our own biology and all of biology. And with these tools, we can remake all of life on Earth. And how far can that go? Well, you figure all of life on Earth is made of the same building blocks, and all of life represents only a tiny fraction of possible life. And we have to approach this with a huge level of humility, because 4 billion years of evolution is a lot. Just because we have a tool doesn't mean it's inevitable that we will use it wisely. It's actually likely we may use it unwisely. And that creates a lot of opportunities, because nature has all kinds of terrible bugs. I agree with Max. Our answer, when people say, I want to go back and live in nature like my ancestors in the Stone Age, that sucked. I mean, they were always afraid of starving to death, getting eaten by predators. If they saw our lives, that would be the greatest thing in the world. What we think of as nature isn't nature. It's like corn. There's no corn. There's no dog in nature as it was for our ancestors.
Are we going to be able to upgrade our genetics?
We will be able to change our genetics, and there will be a debate about whether it's an upgrade or not. Last year, the world's first 2 CRISPR babies were born in China. I'm part of as you know, the World Health Organization International Advisory Committee on Human Genome Editing, and I have also personally condemned what happened in China last year. And He Jiankui, the Chinese biophysicist, he wasn't.
Can you say what that happened, just to make sure everybody...
last year in China, a biophysicist named He Jiankui secretly edited the genomes of 2 pre-implanted embryos that became little girls that were born last October. Of these embryos, the father had HIV and the mother did not. But there are lots of ways when you have one HIV father, like sperm washing, that the child will not have HIV. But what he was trying to do was to confer an advantage. As a matter of fact, in Sweden, there are more people who have disrupted copies of the CCR5 gene, which creates increased resistance to HIV. And so what he was trying to do is make these Chinese kids a little more like Swedes. He didn't succeed. It was wildly unethical. But even had he not done this, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now, the world's first gene-edited babies would have been born, and there would have been a transparent, accountable, public process for doing that. And that's where we're going. Within 20 years, there will be tens of thousands of gene-edited babies. And within 50 years, there will be many millions of genome-edited babies born every year. This is where we are going. And there's lots of great reasons, because, as I was saying, nature is buggy. Every time some little kid dies of some terrible genetic disorder, that's a bug. And we shouldn't say, oh, that's nature. We love nature so much, let this kid die. We want to beat that. Every time a 90-year-old gets dementia or Alzheimer's, that's a bug. I don't want that to happen to my parents or the people I love. I want to fight, and that's the history of our species. But these technologies can be abused. And that's why, as I said at the outset, we really need to think about the ethical frameworks that we can use, because it would be terrible to say something could be abused, therefore we shouldn't do it. That's the wrong answer. It's something could be abused and it has a huge upside. How do we optimize the good and minimize the bad?
And where do you draw the line? What was the conversation at WHO about this?
Yeah.
I mean, is there a line being drawn?
Well, the comfortable line, if I were just to ask everybody in this audience, are you comfortable with therapeutic applications of genetic technologies, for example, to cure terrible, deadly genetic diseases? My guess is
Wait, let's ask them.
Okay, are you comfortable? Raise your hand.
Okay.
Good, everybody. If you're not comfortable, just raise your hand just so I know who you are. Okay, nobody. Good.
They don't dare.
Are you comfortable using gene-edited tools to enhance human capabilities, not cure diseases, but create enhancements? All right, it's some.
Less hands.
It's less hands. Okay, good. We got one more. Latecomer. Unfortunately, there is no clear defensible line between those two, because what is therapeutic and what is an enhancement is based on our context. I mean, everybody here is immunized. You are an enhanced human being. It wasn't that you had measles or whatever, smallpox, and then you were cured. You just decided it's good to be biologically enhanced. So we're going to want to be enhanced to protect ourselves against future threats. And we're going to want to be enhanced to live healthier longer, to have resistance to viruses.
Max in on this. Can you talk a bit about, and you have written and spoken about diversity, the risks, the disadvantages of this? Do you draw the same line? Or
Are you asking me about biotech now or about AI?
the combination of using them together?
Well, I mean, the ultimate merger will come if AI enables us to completely understand how the human mind works. I think many people have this sort of backwards and think we're not going to get human-level artificial intelligence until after we understand how our intelligence works. But that's very similar to if I told you that we would never have gotten flying machines until we were first able to understand how birds fly and build a mechanical bird. I would recommend that you check out the TED Talk on the mechanical bird. There was a German team who did it some years ago. It's super cool. But it took 100 years longer to do that, than to just build a flying machine. And when you came here from the US, did you take a mechanical bird?
I did.
Or an airplane?
I did.
Or
Mechanical
just an airplane,
bird.
which is because the airplane was a lot simpler. And the reason this happened is very important to understand if you want to predict what's going to happen with AI. When evolution comes up with something, after working on it over the eons, right? It is incredibly constrained in what it can build. It can only build things that can self-assemble. If you're an engineer, you don't care. It can only build things which can self-repair. If you're an engineer, you don't care if your laptop has to self-repair or not. And it can only build things which only use the most common atoms that are abundant in nature. So it can't use most of the periodic table. On the other hand, it doesn't give a hoot about whether it's simple for a human to understand. So it often comes up with very complicated, sort of hacked solutions, which just do the job and are very obscure. When we build things, we make airplanes shaped like cylinders because it's simpler to do the math, and it turns out generally for flying machines there are much simpler ways than doing it with a bird. And I'm quite confident that it's the same with intelligence. There are much easier ways to build a machine that can do everything our brains can do. And that's obviously what we're going to discover first. And once that happens, most AI researchers are guessing it'll happen in a few decades. Then we can use that, among other things, to help us understand how our more complicated brains work.
But I'm thinking about more the social implications of this. Like if we're using AI for the purposes that you're talking about, how are we handling diversity, bias? There's what happens with compassion and creativity, like a lot of the maybe softer.
That depends on who controls these things, right? If you
Who's going to control
yeah,
it?
if you are convinced that there's nothing to worry about with human level AI, I would like you to just take a moment and think about your least favorite leader on the planet for a moment, and then just imagine that they now have within their control.
Who could that be?
Super intelligence.
Well, it's a race to the bottom.
They have it now in their control. Just imagine the superhuman intelligence that they can use to take over the world and force everybody to do things exactly their way. Do you feel great about this scenario?
No.
No. So, in that case, your vision for diversity, lack of bias, whatever, probably goes out the window because their idea of what's fair, might not be yours, right? So I think this is actually the most important democracy issue of our time. Who's going to control this? If we fail to have a good, robust public discussion and make sure that the decisions are made by a well-informed public, then we know who's going to decide this, right? It's going to be a bunch of nerds who've had too much Red Bull, who have not been elected, and just because you're good at programming AI doesn't mean you're an expert on human happiness, right?
And then let me just add to this issue of bias. So certainly, and Max has written about this, so that there's the bias of the data set. So we just need to make sure that we have data sets that are representative so that when the machine learning tools are drawing conclusions, it is drawn from some representative sample. In genetics and biotech, the same issue exists because right now, most of the insights in understanding polygenic complex genetic traits is coming from the UK Biobank, which is largely white and European. So there are a lot of efforts to diversify these data pools. But as I said in my remarks, there's another issue of diversity. Here in Europe, I'm actually the son of a refugee who came to the United States after the war. But we know what happens when powerful genetic technology, even genetic theories, combine with toxic politics. But we also, I think very likely, will face a situation in the world where there could be a conflict between the societal need to maintain genetic diversity. And genetic diversity means that you have lots of available options because you may face some new challenge, your species, some new challenge in the future that you couldn't have foreseen. At the time of the dinosaurs, I bet most people would say it's better to be a T-Rex than a cockroach, but you would have been better off as a cockroach. And so what we need to say, but from an individual perspective, if you're a parent having a kid, I think a lot of parents will say, well, I don't want a kid who's a recessive carrier of some deadly disease, some ticking time bomb. I want to have a kid who's going to live a long and healthy life and be resistant to viruses and all these kinds of things, which may seem like a really good thing. It may even be, in the context of now, a good thing. But if that limits our species-wide diversity, it could actually pose a fundamental threat to all of us.
And I just want to briefly agree with
And
what
then
you're
we're gonna
saying there,
open
that it's important to not conflate the kind of problems which come inadvertently, even with the best intentions, like a lot of the bias problems we've had, where people just didn't understand their systems well enough. And that's also what caused a lot of those AI mishaps and accidents I showed you. That, on one hand, best intentions, but oops, versus deliberate malicious intent, which we, I think, talk about way too little. You could imagine using bioengineering to develop some sort of weapon that will only kill people in a certain ethnic group. Or you could imagine that least favorite person you thought about using AI to specifically go kill people or harm people in some group that you don't like, right? We need to talk about that too.
Yeah,
And
there's a lot of utopia, dystopia to be discussed. I just want to, we're coming along here in the time. I want to open up a bit because I have this amazing system, and the questions are up here too, but also ranking questions. And I will pick a few and call on you where you have given your name. And I think what you were just touching on is maybe a question for you, Max. But Neda, where are you, Neda? Where you can ask your question. Neda, N-E-D-A.
Wait, her question's right there.
maybe you have to ask it for her.
Well, I mean, but
Okay.
the process, we're in Sweden, we're going to follow the process, which was to ask Neda, but I will read her question. Okay. We all know we need global regulation to manage risks of AI and biotech. Please, can you comment on some sort of roadmap and how to start some of the legal safeguards and how to scale to avoid what you were just coming into?
Yeah, I think biology, again, and biotech, so hat off to you, right, is a great example of how to do it right, where those who know the most about it, who are actually working on the technology, get ahead of the game and decide, we think we should draw the line here, and then they persuade the politicians, rather than being dragged kicking and streaming into it by being in denial. This is what started to happen also a lot in the AI movement. Unfortunately, most politicians today still don't really have much of a technical background and haven't really
gap.
understood the issues enough, so that's why that doesn't even come up as election issues. So we have.
Well, we saw it come up when Zuckerberg testified in Congress. We saw
how ignorant the politicians were, precisely. But you know,
wasn't good.
Get less ignorant politicians. Don't let them get away with this. The next time there's an election in Sweden, make sure that every time there's any debate, they get asked all these questions and get embarrassed. And guess what? Then they're going to study up.
Yeah, and so you're all getting a copy of both of our books on your way out. So you have the hardback version of Hacking Darwin. The paperback is coming out, at least in the United States, in April, and it has a political guide at the end of the book saying, here's how you can get involved. Here are questions that you can ask your elected officials. But I want to circle back to a slide that Max had. So as I mentioned before, I'm part of the World Health Organization Advisory Committee on Human Genome Editing. And in our first meeting, the first thing that I said was that everybody in this room, and it's scientists and bioethicists, and about 18 of us, everybody in this room, when they think back to the gold standard, they think to Max's slide about Asilomar 1975, it was the early in the era of recombinant DNA, later called GM, and the scientists got together, they established smart guidelines and principles, and those guidelines and principles have by and large been followed since. And that's why today it is perfectly safe for humans to consume genetically modified crops. As a matter of fact, in over 40 years of research, there's not been a single study ever showing that human consumption of GM crops are bad for you. I said in this meeting in Geneva, that's why I think Asilomar 1975 was a total failure. Because lots of people in Africa and South Asia are dying because people in Europe and elsewhere are so afraid of genetically modified crops that they're literally, in effect, willing to kill poor people in order to get non-GM strawberries and other kinds of fruits. And why do I say killing? Because in the world's poorest country, the only industry that exists is agriculture, and the only way they're going to get resources is by exporting their agricultural products, and Europe is in many cases their biggest market. And if they can't, what are they going to do? So that's why I think, and as I said in my remarks, we can't just, it's the scientists and the experts need to be part of the solution, but we have to broadly educate the public. We need to bring the public along in this process in a way that didn't happen in Asilomar. And it's really hard because when there's not a crisis, no one's paying attention. When there is a crisis, people rush to the barricades. But now is the time we can get ahead of this issue.
Rasmus is asking a question about society.
I was just thinking because how can we really democratize like these discussions regarding like AI and gene editing? For instance, there's a lot of people that have opinions but not really have the time or interest to actually go through and learn about the subjects. If you understand my question.
Mm-hmm. I think part of the problem is they don't understand. They haven't learned enough about it to realize that the things that they're really angry about are caused by those very things that they don't pay attention to. So a lot of people, for example, in the US, right, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Jeff Bezos, they're all nice guys, I can confirm that personally, but they own as much wealth as 160 million Americans, the poorest half. There are many Americans who are very angry about the fact that they're poorer than their parents, but they haven't understood the connection between that and the fact that technology is growing income inequality right now, so they don't take any action. I think if we can just get out the basic messages of how the things that we're talking about here actually linked to things that people care about, they will have more motivation to engage, and then they will make their voices heard, and then things will change.
And yeah, and I totally agree with you. There needs to be a process of public education, engagement, empowerment, and then the people who are empowered need to be part of a democratic decision-making process. But it's really hard, and my philosophy is there is a river that's flowing of people's attention. And those of us who are talking about issues like this, some of us and I think, well, we should divert that river. And if that river flows to this place and everyone is like watching documentaries and reading science-y books, then we'll be able to have this conversation. It's my view that it's really hard to divert the river. So we need to go where the river is flowing. I mean, I'm working with the creator of the Kardashians, and we are pushing a science-based popular reality television show that is going to, in a way, it's kind of like mushed up broccoli with mushed up pears to feed to your kids, is that we really want to say, well, this is really exciting. We were talking about the future of life, of work, of humanity, but we have to make it engaging. Like, we can't be in a little, palace on a hill. We have to engage people, and that means on multiple terms.
We get a few more in because we're coming short on time. Peter, privacy, and then Stephanie on the EU. Peter there, where's Stephanie? In the back, maybe you can go to her right after Peter so we get more action here.
Yeah, hi.
And we try shorter answers just so we can get like a few more in. We did lightning talks, now we do lightning rounds.
Well, the privacy question was a little bit to the dystopian thing that you mentioned. And if you think of 1984 and other things, you talked a lot about data and transparency, but do we ultimately have to think anyway to give up privacy overall? Because everything will be based, as I understood, on data being accessible to pretty much everything in healthcare and in other areas. So do we have to give up privacy?
I'd say no. Is that short enough? Because we actually have very clever technical solutions where you can get best of both worlds. You can have massive databases, for example, with all its personal medical data of everybody in the same format, but it can be cleverly encrypted, so you can even process it without those doing the processing having any access to what's actually in it. If there's a will, there's a way.
Can we create new techniques to protect privacy?
We have them already.
Yeah.
It's not really being deployed. In Sweden, it's like a joke. Like every landsting has their own. They have like incompatible medical systems and blah blah blah. The solutions exist. The politicians maybe don't know it.
So I hope that it's
Something
true
wrong with
that
your
there
mic.
will.
You have
I hope,
bad luck.
Yeah. I hope that it's true that there will be a technical solution to this problem, but I also think that we're going to have to recognize that we can't live on one extreme, that ultimate individual privacy is not a societal good. It's actually a societal harm. And zero privacy is not a harm. We have to be, not it's a harm, but we have to be somewhere in the middle. And Europe has bet its entire future on the issue of privacy. It's my personal view that GDPR, as good as it feels personally, could be the ultimate anti-competitive act of Europe that will just opt Europe out of 21st century competitiveness. Because when we're talking about access, and I hope there's a technical fix, but access to these big, massive data sets is how we're going to glean the insights that will actually help us all. And so we need to find a way to strike that balance.
Stephanie, and then where's Gabriella? Because you also had a question about the EU and regulations. Gabriella?
Yeah, so my question follows on a bit from Netta's. The EU has not taken a very proactive stance right now to allow us to access, different editing technologies. So what is it going to take for us as a combination of industry and science to give them the confidence that we'll be able to move forward? And is something concrete actually happening right now?
Right. Are you talking about human editing or all of editing?
I was thinking more human, but it could be.
Yeah. So on the non-human editing, there's the big debate: are CRISPR edits are those considered genetic modifications? Because with GM, at least traditionally, it's bringing genetic materials from one species into another. And here it's you're turning on and off genes in a way that could happen naturally. And so there's a big debate about how that happens. In terms of application in humans, I think what we're talking about is life, and we need to be extremely cautious. There's incredible progress being made in gene therapies, and that's pushing forward. But we want our regulators to be a little bit conservative, because there are things that sound good, and there are things that we keep curing mice of every disease and they live longer and whatever, but we have to be careful, because as exciting as it is to meddle with the code of life, and we must meddle with the code of life, as I said earlier, to fix problems, we need to do it carefully and cautiously. In the United States, in the 90s, one of the early patients died from a gene therapy, and that pushed everything back by a decade. And so we just need to be methodical and careful, and I think that's good. And that's, again, in Geneva, that's one of the things that we're thinking about.
All right, we're coming to a quick end here. Did you want to comment on that before we wrap?
Well, maybe just to inject some optimism right at the end here. We, of course, want to draw clear lines. I think we should ban lethal autonomous weapons and put in place various other regulations so we don't get the kind of techlash you're mentioning, which can be a backlash which spoils all the fun. But it's important at the same time remember also all the amazing opportunities, even though newspapers prefer writing about the negative because it has higher click-through rates. We today have accomplished everything we love about civilization with human intelligence. So if we can amplify human intelligence with machine intelligence and use that to solve all these problems that we've failed to solve so far, curing diseases and helping life flourish like never before, again, maybe for billions of years throughout our universe, right? Then we can have a much more amazing future of life than our most optimistic ancestors ever dreamt of. So let's fight for that.
No, I think it's great. And I think that we really have to recognize that there's such a positive potential story, and we need to be honest that there are real risks, which is why hats off to Bayer and Leaps for having these kinds of conversations. Not every company is doing that. Other companies are saying, well, let's just stay under the radar. But we have to be honest that there's a good side and the bad side. And I'll just one final
utopia.
So one final thought is that I think both of us are saying that we need to have public empowerment and engagement. This has been a really interesting evening, but we will have failed if you all now don't feel empowered to take this conversation into your lives, your workplaces, your families, your communities, your places of worship, because that's the way we get empowerment. It has to be a chain reaction of empowerment and engagement.
These guys are amazing, right? I have a gazillion questions more, but
You were awesome.
We're not done.
Great job.
And we ended on we ended with a last word there on engagement, and that's what this was about. So I want to invite Karen Riegel from Leaps by Bayer, who's actually running the programs around engagement. This one in particular, you've been in Berlin and you've been in Boston, and it's your first time here, and we would like to hand over to you.
Yeah, here we have one here. Here. Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to start off by saying thank you. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Max. Thanks to our rock star moderator, Elaine. This has been a fascinating discussion, and there's very little that I can add to all the thoughts that you've shared other than our appreciation. I mean, as Jamie said, this is something that's very important to us at Leaps. We take the challenges that you've brought up in this discussion very seriously. It's something that we as investors need to be incredibly conscious of, and that we as an organization, as we invest in these transformative yet complex biotechnologies, we need to go into this with open eyes, and we need to bring people and the public into this discussion. So thank you so much to the Norrsken Foundation. Thanks, Nicholas. Thanks, Funda. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Tom. Lisa, for making this beautiful event possible. Thanks to all of you for being a fantastic part of it, for bringing your energy and enthusiasm.
As a last note, before we all head on to the reception, is don't forget to grab your gift bags on the way out, because we have a copy of both Jamie and Max's book, so Hacking Darwin, Life 3.0. We'd like you to take those home, share them with your friends, really continue to dive into this conversation. It's so important. Thank you guys again so much.
Gary.
Thank you.